but it just shows you like how long it can take to get things published, to get films made, to get plays, to create a play. I always try and just say that to young people that, you have to, people think these things happen like overnight, and they just really don't. You've just got to keep on keeping on, and it's really hard. It's hard when anybody who's in the arts knows this. You get rejected, you have doors slammed in your face, and you've just got to have the heart of a rhino and just carry on,
So lovely to meet you here on Zoom, Pamela.
Yes, thanks for having me.
But you are based in Johannesburg, am I right?
Yes, I am.
Were you born and raised there?
No, I was actually born in KwaZulu-Natal in a little town called Pietermaritzburg, and I lived there for a while. Born to a mom who's half Afrikaans, half French, and a dad who's Irish. So
okay, that's interesting.
Quite a mongrel, yeah. Lived in Durban for a bit, and then they moved up they sort of have lived between Zimbabwe and South Africa. They did live. I mean, they've passed now. So I grew up mainly in Zimbabwe, in Harare and Bulawayo, and I still have family in Victoria Falls and in Harare. And then I came to Joburg in 1984, and I went to school to quite a sort of iconic school here called Sacred Heart College. And that was in 1984. And in 1985, like, we had the first black-haired boy, I think probably of any sort of formerly white private school. So, it was, I really kind of got conscientized weirdly enough, I had been living in a country that had gone through independence, but I got conscientized properly when I went to Sacred Heart College. So, so I was there. Then I went back to Maritzburg, weirdly enough, for university. And I mean, and there's this sort of South African joke. You do your BA and you meet your husband, which is what I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's so rude because it's basically like, your Bachelor of Arts degree is so useless, find yourself a husband. So it was kind of ironic that I did. Mm-hmm. And and then, I have always loved Joburg. Sorry.
No, why did you choose Pietermaritzburg to go back to?
Because my parents had actually moved back there. They found Joburg very hectic after Zimbabwe. And so they moved back to Maritzburg. And, they were very cavalier about my education. So you had to do what was then your standard 9. It's now grade 11. You had to do your last 2 years at the same school. So my father was like, you're a year young for the class. You can just repeat that year. And I was like, I don't think so. Okay. So Sacred Heart actually arranged for me to stay in Joburg. I lived with a family from the school. I mean, it was just crazy. It was crazy. But Brother Neil was just such a legend. And he arranged for me to stay at the school where I was very badly behaved and luckily did not get expelled.
Oh, okay. Are you a little rebel?
I definitely was when I came to Joburg. I was quite badly behaved. And but I had my moments at university as well. But I think because I'd sort of gone a bit wild at school, I probably calmed down slightly. But okay. And that's where I found drama.
Yeah, but were you already in school interested in drama?
Oh, yes. I had done... the hilarious thing, actually, I used to do speech and drama in Harare. And I remembered, and I'm so sad I don't still have my little exercise book where I'd said I'm going to become an actress one day.
Really?
And, gosh, that was 50 years ago probably. And I did have a stint at acting. So I did sort of have a bash at it. And I had an agent and everything. Because from Maritzburg, we sort of did our gap year, which turned into 2 gap years, and then we came back to Maritzburg and then back to Joburg. So when I moved back to Joburg, I sort of got an agent and I tried to have a bash at acting. But I soon sort of realized it wasn't for me. It's a tough life. And yeah, it was very different. I think you acting at university where you're sort of doing Shakespeare and Brecht and whatever, very different to acting in the real world where you're going to be doing, sort of very commercial stuff that, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't, and I'd never really got into I suppose the serious acting, and that was what I knew. So I wasn't really prepared for the commercial stuff, so it didn't really work for me, but I'm glad I gave it a bash,
But your parents, were they very supportive?
Oh, no. I mean,
okay.
My parents would say, "Oh, darling, at least you can teach."
Oh, okay.
So they were like, really like, is this a good life choice? And I mean, I would agree with them. When I taught at Wits University for a while, and I always used to say to the kids, I said, no marrying other actors. Okay, your partner cannot be a creative person.
Oh, really?
Find somebody with a proper career who's going to support you. So that used to be my mantra for my kids I taught.
Yeah, because in South Africa also there are not so many possibilities.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, in the apartheid era, you had the performing arts councils, and if you didn't get into one of those, basically, what were you going to do, kind of thing. So yeah, and then afterwards, it was kind of just you were a freelancer. So if it is something you want to do, I do think you've got to have several side hustles, or you've probably got to go overseas. Although, I think it's hard overseas as well. Obviously, there's a lot more going on. But, and you've got to be an entrepreneur. You've got to be able to create your own work. But I think that's true everywhere now. I mean, we've seen a real downturn in film and TV work in South Africa. Publishing's going through a hard time. So, all the kind of areas I work in. And, I mean, it's a worldwide thing. It's not just us.
Yeah. But even here, I mean, and I've spoken to a few young actors and actresses, and they also, you really have to be very motivated to find jobs or to create, and to get into the industry. And it's not so easy, even in America, where we think, okay, that's where the films are made or where the film industry is so huge. But it is true. But don't you think also it's in other careers, even, if you think of people not in the arts, they also have to sort of get in there, or if they don't work for a company and they have to do their own, they say looking for jobs, they also have to really know their thing and create, not create, but find solutions to getting into jobs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a worldwide issue, and obviously with AI, etc., and economic downturn, and I think it is difficult for everyone. I don't think we're special in that way as creatives. You see kids all the time on social media, with a string of degrees and battling to get work. I mean, we've got a terrible unemployment rate here in South Africa. I don't even want to know what the unofficial one is. I think it's in the 40s by now, but it's desperate. And I think, I know for me, I've been a workaholic probably my whole life, and only the last couple of years I've kind of calmed down a bit. But work definitely gives me my sense of purpose. So I really feel, I mean, never mind just, trying to put food on the table, but your sense of purpose, your sense of self. Absolutely. I think it's very tough.
Mm. But how do you got to do writing from drama and teaching?
So what happened was, I had been part of like a kids theatre company when I moved to Joburg, and I worked at what was then the Civic Theatre, now the Joburg Theatre. So I was part of this kids' theatre company for 2 years, and I also did stand-up comedy there. So I had my little go at acting, and then that work dried up. And then I think the following year, I had exactly one job. So I took a play to the Grahamstown Festival, which I wrote with another friend, which actually bombed horribly. But then I decided, so that was the year I actually had a bash at writing a novel. And also I got a grant from the Gauteng Department of Arts and Culture. And I started a little kids touring company. And I used to just write the scripts myself. So that's how I kind of got my start in both kind of novel writing and writing plays. And then the writing plays thing, then I actually got sort of some corporates interested, and I did a bit of corporate work, and that lasted until I had my son in 2000. And then the work started sort of drying up then, if I remember. And I think then I started lecturing at BITS. I was tutoring, I was teaching and whatever. And then I did my master's degree in creative writing. It was the first, we were part of the first intake. So Wits had only had like a master's by dissertation before that. And I started off in the drama department. And I did, God, what did I do? Oh, I wrote a play, I wrote a musical, and I wrote a screenplay. And then I switched over to the creative writing, and I did some short stories, and I did a couple of chapters of my novel. But what happened was that my son's kinder music teacher came to watch my play, which I think was very, was it blasphemous? I don't know. And she was actually quite a big Christian. So she didn't love the play, but they were looking for writers. In fact, it was quite funny because it was kind of like, that play was horrible, but we need writers for Generations, which was, I think, the biggest soapy in South Africa at that time. And I had been wanting to get into TV writing because I was finding lecturing quite hard, having a new baby, and and I'd have to be teaching for 3 hours in the afternoon, rushing home to breastfeed, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was an absolute baptism by fire. My first scripts were horrible. I had an entirely horrible first year trying to learn how to be a TV writer. It was nasty. And then I moved on to Mubango, where I just learned so much, and I was there for like 17 years, and I learned so much culturally as well. We had 2 cultural advisors, so I learned, and you could like really, obviously growing up in both South Africa and Zimbabwe, you think as a white person you're quite special. You don't think you think like that, but you actually do. And that I've actually worked for Black companies my whole career. So that really, that was a process of being deprogrammed from thinking I was so special, and actually understanding what I didn't know. And and just like really learning and seeing the talents and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm very grateful that I had that input, and that, like I say, deep, I mean, it sounds a bit dramatic, but it's like a deep programming where I think, I know maybe it's a worldwide thing, I think we've got the monopoly on racism and xenophobia, but, when you travel, you actually understand that everybody's got their issues, and it is a case of confronting those issues and, having a little come to Jesus chat with yourself about your, prejudices and whatever.
And I was going to ask if all this, going to Zimbabwe and back and Pietermaritzburg and where you were, that all that had an influence on, the thought processes. And you say, yes, that there was definitely something that influenced your thought processes.
Thought processes in what sense?
In the sense of how you saw the whole racial thing, or how you saw the way you thought, or the way you were thinking about, say, the white culture towards the Black culture.
So, I mean, here's the interesting thing. Because I had always been at private schools my whole life. And, you know, the Catholic schools were actually at the forefront of kind of desegregation and, you know, bringing Black kids into the school. So I had always been educated with Black kids. So, you know, that was like very familiar to me. And like I say, I was really shown by my friends at school, like what was going on in 1985, because 1985 was, you know, hectic. I had always been with Black kids. Then I go to university, which is, of course, a public institution. 2 Black kids in the whole drama department when I was there. There were Indian kids, because in KwaZulu-Natal we have a large portion. In fact, I think it is the largest group of Indian people outside India. Okay. I think I'm right. So that kind of was weird to me, to suddenly be, amongst a lot of white people where I actually hadn't been before. And that did make me kind of a bit uncomfortable, but it took a while, you know, it took, like I say, I mean, that was kind of what apartheid did. Apartheid was really successful because it kept us all apart and from actually understanding each other's lives. And it's only when you actually chat to each other and socialize and understand people's pain and issues and what they've had to go through that you learn compassion. You see, if you are kept in your little areas and you never have to see anybody else, well, you can keep up this pretense that, you know, apartheid's great and it's working out well for everyone. But once you start hearing people's stories, you know, you can't pretend anymore that it's okay.
But you also wrote a book. Am I right? It's Misconception.
Yes, that was my first book, which is actually out of print now. That was my first book, and it was an absolute struggle to get it published. And it really was, I think, I was appalled at motherhood and how difficult it was. So I needed to like vent quite a lot. So I wrote Misconception. I think I did a stand-up comedy thing, and I also wrote the play Oh Baby because I was really not very happy about it and felt the need to share that I thought it was quite tough. And so that was my first book, and I finished it. So I think I wrote the first, so I basically needed some chapters for my master's. So I thought, let me quickly write about my life. So I wrote 3 chapters, I think, whilst breastfeeding my daughter. So that was probably in 2004. It eventually got published in 2012. There was the digital arm of what was then Random House here, Random Strake in South Africa. So it got digitally published by Ikaya in 2012, and I think it sold 84 copies. But it was enough that when they amalgamated and became Penguin Random House, they decided to bring it out in print. So 2012 it was first published, then it was brought out in print in 2015. And that's really when my whole publishing journey began, because then I brought out, 3 books that I'd actually been working on for a long time, but I brought out a book in 2015, one in 2016, one in 2017. So yeah, that's kind of how that began for me. But it just shows you like how long it can take to get things published, to get films made, to get plays, to create a play. I always try and just say that to young people that, you have to, people think these things happen like overnight, and they just really don't. You've just got to keep on keeping on. And it's really hard. It's hard when anybody who's in the arts knows this. You get rejected, you have doors slammed in your face, and you've just got to have the heart of a rhino and just carry on,
But did you have always a dream of writing a book, or was that just something that happened?
I have always been obsessed with books, and I think my dream was probably more in the performing arts, actually. First of all, I wanted to be a dancer, and then it was an actor. But it was inevitable that I would write a book because I used to get shouted at. Like my mother, we used to have these little brown suitcases in Zimbabwe, and I would have a book inside the suitcase, and then I'd be leaning on my suitcase pretending to do my work. And I would just and I'd be reading the book, and my mother would catch me and cuck on me and whatever, because I was supposed to be doing my homework. But I was always doing that. I can remember sitting in maths class, and I was quite good at maths actually, but I would be, because we used to go to the library on Fridays, and I'd just have a book there, and I'd just be reading my book while maths was going on. So it was kind of inevitable that I was going to, writing for me is a compulsion. I have to write.
So what inspires writing then for you? You said that you wrote about motherhood and that how that affected you, but what otherwise would inspire you?
So I journal every day, which I also encourage young writers to do. And I think it is how I make sense of the world. I have to write things down to process them. I think, and that's how I get justice. So it's through books. Maybe you didn't get the ending you wanted in real life, but in a book or in a script or whatever, you can get that ending. You can get the justice you were after, or you can vent, So in the one book, there were a group of girls who were not so nice to my daughter. Should not have messed with my daughter, because then they landed up in a book. So, yeah, that's, what they say, never piss a writer off. So, yeah.
You give me ideas now. I would love a few rounds myself as well, so maybe I should start journaling.
Totally. I highly recommend it.
But yeah, so, and do you ever get writer's block?
The only time what is actually a killer for writers is social media. I am definitely, that is one of my addictions, and I have to really control my social media. I mean, I used to absolutely love Twitter, and it was such a great community of writers. And then our boy Elon came along and messed it up. So I don't love Twitter so much anymore, but now I've moved on to TikTok, and I'm having a lot of fun there. But I do have to, social media is great because obviously we can get a lot of free advertising and marketing for any events we want or whatever, or books or movies or TV shows. But it is very addictive, and it is also very anxiety provoking. So you really have to watch, your consumption of it. What was the original question? I'm waffling.
Yeah, no, writer's block. Writer's block, but yeah.
Oh, yes, writer's block. So usually I was always very disciplined. I think social media is an issue, but during COVID, I battled. Suddenly I couldn't write. I was battling to write fiction. We did write our joint novel during COVID, Chasing Marian, but in terms of my own sort of novel writing, which I used to do every weekend, I couldn't. And during COVID was also the time where I became obsessed with nonfiction. I think the world was so crazy, I couldn't actually believe fiction. So I became very obsessed with nonfiction. Although apparently my sister says as you get older, you love nonfiction. So I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting.
Mm.
But how do you think in schools, for example, or in the education system, can we stimulate children to write more? Because I sort of think if we look at languages and how languages are taught, then creative writing sometimes get, less than or there's a lot of sort of how can you say, boundaries around it, so that children don't get more opportunity to do creative writing.
that is such a tough one because, yeah, I mean, I can remember us having to write sort of creative essays. I think I wrote a couple of them in matric, my final year, if I remember correctly, and one of them did quite well. But I have to tell you, nobody would have thought from my work at school that I would have ended up being a writer at all. I mean, there was no great talent being shown there, let me assure you. So I agree with you. I think probably it's actually through drama that kids learn more, and maybe creating little plays and that sort of thing. Because my other thing now is that, I mean, my kids are not like huge readers. My son probably has started reading more. My daughter's a filmmaker. She's studying film. But I just think kids consume stories differently now. So I don't even know if they are. And now with kind of I want to call it GPT.
Yeah.
Is it even a thing anymore? Are we? I don't know. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but maybe everything creative will change how we view it and how we consume it. And I mean, it's already changed. Kids love YouTube. They love the stories on TikTok. Maybe books will become like this really weird little hobby that we have. I don't know.
I don't know. I sometimes think things go to one side and then it comes back again. So it's like we used to have records, played records.
Yes.
And then it changed to CDs. And now all the young people seem to want to play, want to buy records again. We have a shop here in Vienna filled with these old records. And I took my children in there the other day and said, look, this is how we used to shop for music, not on Spotify and on all these other platforms, but you went into a record store and you looked at the cover and it was this thing to put the vinyl on the record player. But it seems to be now that young people do that still. Again.
It costs an absolute fortune. My daughter loves it. She has a huge vinyl collection. I find it hilarious. And the other thing she likes doing is using film to take pictures. Yeah. No, spends an absolute fortune developing it because she likes, obviously the quality of it. And it is something different.
Yeah.
I do think, I don't know, this is my prediction, but I think with AI, because I think we're going to get eventually movies, the actors will be AI generated and whatever. I actually think theatre will have a resurgence because people will be craving that live performance, that real person. So I suspect maybe, like you said, things will come around again, Just on the points about trying to like encourage kids and whatever with writing. So I'm on the Kingsmead Book Fair committee. So it's one of our big book fairs in Joburg, and it's where my daughter went to school. And somebody there actually started a literary competition for children and, a creative writing competition. And it has been such a hit. So I think things like that probably, I know that's how we got my son to read books. He had a competition at school where you got a big fat chocolate if you read X amount of books. And oh my word, did that motivate him? So I don't know. Maybe that's the way we have to go, because I think they've just got so much, they can find stories everywhere. Whereas, I mean, for us, we only had TV in Zimbabwe. TV started at like 5:00 or whatever. I mean, it was better than South Africa, but still you had one channel and that was what you watched. Whereas now they've got so no wonder I was obsessed with reading. That's where I got my stories from,
Yeah, that's true. That's, we're sort of now bombarded with all this, with information and everybody doing their thing. And we've got the phones. So a lot of people, and there's a positive and negative for me about that as well. You have the possibility to use your phone to make short little movies. And of course, everybody does that on TikTok. And although it's not, like a proper movie, but it's that experimental type of thing that you can do, that we used to do with camcorders, and we just didn't have a platform to put it on. But I think it's there has to be some way where it's getting back to normality again, or authenticity again, or the real thing again.
And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it will. I think you'll have pockets of it, but I think also we can't lament where we are now. If you look at sort of old writings where novels were considered like novels were going to rot everybody's brains, back in the day. If you read novels, you were definitely going down a dark path. So I do think, like I said, I think social media, it's got to be monitored, controlled, whatever. I think the same thing with AI, but we can't get away from all of, these innovations. They are here. Controls need to be put in place. I think, I think this technology can be dangerous. So yes, but I don't think we can run away from it.
No, that's true.
And I also think, I know people get very angry, and rightfully so, about their work being used to train AI without being compensated, which is what's happened. And I think there's a big lawsuit or whatever. But in terms of AI, I often think of it in the sense of, can you imagine during the Industrial Revolution where suddenly you didn't have a job anymore because now a machine could do it?
Yeah.
So I sort of think of it that way, like, are we really any more, as creative people, are we more special than workers in a factory? Not really, I think we're going to have to learn to work with these things. And I know it makes people sort of very angry, and it's a very polarizing topic. I mean, that's the other issue I have with social media, is that you can't actually sit down and have a nuanced chat about anything. Everybody's got these extreme opinions, and so I think whether we like it or not, it's here. We're going to have to deal with it, and maybe there will be some upsides, like maybe theatre will really boom.
But tell me, Pamela, what are your wishes for the future, or what is the dream?
For me personally, it's so weird, because I was just thinking this morning, I kind of am already living my dream. Like I get to make stories for a living. I write novels. I've written a memoir. I'm a ghostwriter. I help people, write their stories. I work in TV. I do a bit of teaching. I kind of really, I love what I do. I love stories, and I love helping people fix their stories or get to tell their stories. So I kind of am already where I'm at. I'm now sort of in the process. I've got the rights back for 3 of my novels, so I'm looking at self-publishing now, which is quite exciting, which I've always been too scared to do. And my daughter has designed the cover for the one book, and she's working on the next one. I think maybe the other dream is to, we've been working for years now trying to get my one book made into a movie. So that could be a dream as well. But I think at the moment, I don't know about you, personal dreams kind of feel very small potatoes. And what I'd like to see is peace, an end to war, an end to hunger, and an end to intolerance. I'd just like to see more compassion in the world. And I do think that's where the arts come in.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
to share people's stories, and to, just hopefully get people to see that basically we're all the same. We all have the same hopes and dreams, and
Yeah, that's true. What a beautiful wish. Pamela, thank you so much for your time. It was so lovely talking to you in Johannesburg.
Thank you so much for having me.